Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Cafe Ole. My name is Jay, and here at Cafe Ole, we go over the everyday Hebrew you need here in Israel to succeed, whether that's uh, reading and paying your electricity and utility bills, keeping up with the news, going grocery shopping and reading nutritional labels, striking up a conversation, interviewing, flirting, all the everyday uses of communication and language that we use in our native languages in countries of origin, except here in Israel, in modern Hebrew. As always, we want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. You can see all of our previous lessons up on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com, type in Cafe Ole, and you'll see a playlist with all of our previous lessons there. And as you see in the chat prompt, you can email us at hebrew@nbn.org.il, or simply write in the chat window if you're joining us live on Zoom, any requests for topics that we have yet to cover, or maybe to review. We want to hear from you what topics you'd like us to cover. This really needs to be practical Hebrew that you need, in addition to what we see as being needed by fellow Olim. So today's lesson it needs no huge introduction. For those of us who are in Israel or following the news here in Israel today, there's one big story that's been covering all the news outlets, and we're going to be doing one of our favorite lessons, which is media literacy, right? How to read the news, even at a beginner's level. How to understand how news outlets, their websites, their other media outlets are designed, and how we can focus on the things that are important to us versus how to move on. Today, we're going to focus on an aspect of today's news, which all revolve around the proposed changes to the judicial system in Israel and the unprecedented protest outside the Knesset today. We're going to focus on what I think, at least, is a very interesting article that came out yesterday that has yet to be covered in English. One of the many reasons we do these lessons in media literacy is to understand that English language media that comes from Israel is not meant for local consumption. I talk about this a lot. It's always worth repeating. You know all the outlets, I know all the outlets. They are meant primarily for consumption abroad. They're not going to cover the day-to-day minute things that Hebrew language media in Israel covers, because people abroad, they don't need to know about traffic accidents and crime that happens and certain statistics and other things that if you're a local inhabitant, you do need to know, at least to keep up with the news. And this is Israel. We love our news. We are aficionados. We are consumers, voracious consumers of news all the time. So with that, let's get started. But two things. Always a regular housekeeping announcement. If you have questions about this specific lesson as I'm going through it, please write that in the Q&A window if you're joining us on Zoom. Only if you have questions, concerns, comments, requests for other topics, please write that in the chat window. I am only looking at the Q&A here as it pertains to this class. Any other questions, concerns, please write that in the chat. We'll be happy to look over that after the lesson. Also, because we are talking about current events, I'm going to do my best to stick to news, and we're not going to delve into personal politics or ideologies or anything like that here. Please keep that in mind, both in terms of what I'm speaking about and, more importantly, or equally importantly, how you reply to what we're teaching today. I promise it's not ideologically driven. It's from not just any news source. Let me just open it up. We are going to be looking at a specific type of news source in Israel, particularly the financial newspapers. We've talked about the financial newspapers before when we've done media coverage in Israel. These are really important. We have three major ones in Israel. This is Kalkalist. Kalkalist is affiliated with Ynet and Yediot Achronot, one of the most highly circulated, biggest circulated news outlets in Israel. We also have Globes. Globes is also published in Hebrew and in English. It models itself after the Financial Times in the UK. Globes English is one of the few exceptions to the rule that I'll talk about English language media. It's excellent media, albeit it's focused on economy, but the the fluency of the English and the depth of what it covers is really good. And then the third is the marker, which is affiliated with Haaretz newspaper. We're going to look at Kalkalis today. And we're going to particularly look at an article that is charting here in Hebrew, not charting anywhere else, but it has some pretty big ramifications for the Israeli economy. Not just because this is the news that we're talking about. I also happen to teach a class for gap year students on the Startup Nation. It all fits together, and you'll see why very shortly. But just to show you this website, this is Kalkalis. This is its main page. You can see here on the left-hand side, it has the indexes of New York Stock Exchange. It has bonds. It has foreign currency. It has Europe. It has the Tel Aviv Stock Exchange, of course. It has Asia. And scrolling down again, it focuses more on economics. It will cover major news like today's protests and the legislative reform, the legislative agenda, but it will also see all sorts of other things. We're going to focus on one of these. If you see at the bottom center of the screen where it says Hakatavot Achamot, the hot headlines, right? Katava or Katava is also a news article. I just want to make it rhyme or be alliterative. And cham is hot. So akatavot achamot, the hot headlines or the hot news items, right? So there's three here. We're going to focus on the second one, which again, as far as I've seen, has not been covered in the same depth as it has in Hebrew. Let me just pull that up today. I will send you a, in today's wrap-up, or the wrap-up rather, for today's class, I'm going to share with you the link to this article. So you can read it on your own, and also so you can see very quickly, just 1 second. So this is the article we're going to read. And it's an analysis of what's happening in the Israeli economy because of the protests and the changes to the judicial system that the government is trying to enact. We're going to go over the headline, the subheadline, and one of the paragraphs together. But what's really cool about this article and Kalkalis in general is that for its major articles, you can listen to it. Right. So for those of you who want both the listening comprehension, but also to go slowly and over the words, in addition to our own lesson, you can simply press here. Right. You can listen to it as you're reading it. So you can also listen to how the words are, and you can go back over it so you can practice your own pronunciation as well as listen to it, which is a really good addition to Hebrew comprehension. So with that, I'm going to pull up, I took some screenshots of the main headline, the subheadline, and one of the paragraphs, and you'll see, just to make it easier, let me just pull this up. Right, I underlined the words we're going to focus on. Again, yes, we're focused, this is a little bit higher level Hebrew than perhaps normally do, but number one, when we do media literacy, it's important to understand the level of Hebrew that average Israelis are paying attention to, even if they don't read financial news, but also we're Olim by choice. A lot of us come with higher education to begin with. You would be reading these articles probably in your native language. I'm teaching you there is a way to do this in Hebrew as well. Again, this isn't meant to memorize. We're just going over it together and to get a sense of more financial terms and economic terms under your belt, in addition to what's happening in the larger news. So with that, let's get started. So you see here, this is a screenshot on the left-hand side of the headline I just showed you. And it says at the top right, bdika. Bdika, we know this word, especially from the last 3 years, it can mean a test, but it also means check. Check is in to check something, right? So bdika, think of it like it's a further analysis of a situation. So let's read the headline together and translate. 37 חברות הייטק מוציאות 780 מיליון דולר מישראל ועוצרות כניסה של 2 מיליארד. Okay, let's read this together. 37 חברות הייטק, you can just read the numbers, so 37, 37, חברות הייטק, חברה, or is a company, חברות, companies, high-tech. Okay, high-tech, you know what that word is. It's a cognate in Hebrew. This is how we write it. Sometimes it does have a hyphen in the middle, but chevrot high-tech is a compound word, right? Because it's two nouns, chevrot, companies, and high-tech, high-tech. So this is how we say high-tech companies, chevrot high-tech. 37 chevrot high-tech, 37 high-tech companies, מוציאות $780 million מישראל. מוציאות. We had this word a couple weeks ago. Many of you with a Jewish background, you know this term very well. Whenever we say a blessing, a bracha over bread, like on Shabbat over challah or other things, right? How does the blessing go? Hamotzi lechem min haaretz, who pulls forth bread from the earth. Lehotzi is to pull out or to withdraw. In this case, to withdraw or to take out. Okay, lehotzi, to force to leave. It comes from the same root as latzet, to leave. Motziot, withdraws. Okay, so 37 high-tech companies withdraw what? 780 million dollars from Israel. Okay, 780 million dollars מישראל. We're in the middle of the second line of the big bolded headline. ואוצרות כניסה של 2 מיליארד. ואוצרות, אוצרות, we've had this word before, it means stops. La'atzor means to stop, as in to stop in place. It's to stop movement. And stops, knisa. Knisa is an entry or entrance. Likanes is to enter. Knisa is an entrance, or in this case, entry. Shel 2 מיליארד. Milliard, in case you were wondering, milliard is how we say in Hebrew billion. Okay, million is million, milliard is billion, and then trillion is trillion, so forth. Okay, so 37 high-tech companies, chevrot high-tech, motziot, are taking out $780 million from Israel, ve'otzrot, and are stopping the entry of $2 billion US. We're going to find out why. Okay. Right under the headline, we're going to start reading. Again, all these red lines indicate the words on the right-hand side, which we're going to go over one by one. בדיקה בקרב עשרות חברות הייטק ציבוריות ופרטיות. So בדיקה, we had that word before, in a test or a check, in this case checking. בקרב, בקרב is our first word here on the right. It's a great word. בקרב means among. Okay. Excuse me. בקרב means among. Okay, so בדיקה בקרב, so a check or testing, or further evaluation, if you want to use a bigger word, among עשרות חברות הייטק ציבוריות ופרטיות. עשרות. עשרות is a word that's really important in Hebrew. We use it all the time, especially in news and media Hebrew. It means tens of. Think of it like in English, dozens. We don't have the same comparative word in Hebrew, literal word, like dozens in Hebrew, because for English speakers, a lot of our sort of abstract quantitative thinking is in the dozens, right? In Hebrew, like in other languages, it's in the tens. So when we say esrot, you can think of it in your head as dozens, if that's easier to say rather than the tens, but it literally means the tens, right? It comes from the word eser or asara. So esrot chevrot high-tech tziburiot upratiot. Okay, in a test, in a checking among what? Tens of chevrot high-tech. We had that already. High-tech companies. What kind of high-tech companies? Tziburiot upratiot. Tziburiot, tziburi means public, and pratiot, private. Okay, so in a test among tens or dozens, if that's easier for you to translate, of high-tech companies, both public and private. ששוויין המצרפי, ששוויין המצרפי 40 מיליארד דולר. ששוויין, okay, this is fancy Hebrew. This is higher level Hebrew. Take a deep breath. It's a good word to know. We need to dissect this word into its three parts. She, shovian. So first off, it's she. It has the prefix she, right? Because it's that or which. So, because that's what we're referring to. Okay. Shovi is our next word here on the right-hand side, right? Shovi means worth. Okay. החברה הזאת, יש לחברה הזאת שווי של מיליארד דולר. That company is worth $1 billion. Okay, shovi is the word, but we're talking about shovian. Shovian has the possessive suffix of shelahen. Theirs, plural feminine. What is theirs, plural feminine? What we're talking about here? Chevrot high-tech. Remember, chevra is a feminine word, meaning company. Chevrot is the plural. So she shovian is referring to she hashovi shelahen, or she hashovi shela chevrot. Okay, so in a test or in a check among dozens of high-tech companies, whose value or whose worth, not just any worth, ha-mitzrafi aggregate, whose aggregate value or aggregate worth is $40 milyard, whose aggregate value, mitzrafi, excuse me, this is a word you don't normally see, but it's a great word to know. Ha-mitzrafi, $40 milyard. Mitzrafi comes from the same root as litzaref, to combine. It's the word that we use, by the way, when you are writing an email and you need to add an attachment. You'll say in a very formal business letter, metzoraf le'email hazeh, right? Tzadi resh pei has something to do with binding, connecting. Okay, so shovyan ha-mitzrafi, whose aggregate worth. Okay, so mitzrafi, they're combined, fancy word in economics, aggregate worth is $40 milyard, 40 billion US dollars. Keep going. Second line here. Ma'ale gam shehen yiman'u milahavir leYisrael 2.2 מיליארד דולר במצטבר. Okay, lots of words here. Let's take it slowly. In a test, right? What we say, we're testing a test that's checking tens of public and private high-tech companies in Israel, which are altogether worth $40 billion. Ma'ale gam shehen yim'anu. Okay, ma'ale. Ma'ale has the same root, ayin lamed hey. Remember, all Hebrew words have that three-letter root, sometimes two, sometimes four, called a shoresh, and that indicates what the word means at its core and connects us to all sorts of other words with the same shoresh. Ma'ale, or ma'ala in this case, because it's bdika. What does that sound like? Aliyah. It comes from the same root as la'alot, to ascend or to make aliyah. Ma'ala arises. Okay? Arises, or it brings up the case, in this case that we're talking about, or however you want to think about it, but this check into these dozens of companies brings up the case, or brings up the fact, gam shehen yiman'u milahavir leYisrael. Gam shehen, also, gam is also, shehen, that they, the companies, yiman'u. Great word on the other side. Our next word that's underlined, yiman'u. Yiman'u is the future tense, plural, third person of lehimana. Lehimana is to abstain or to prevent. If you're watching proceedings in the Knesset and they have a vote, and you'll hear such and such number of members of Knesset nimnaim, right? They abstain, right? So lehimana means to both abstain but also to prevent. It's the passive form of the verb limnoa, to prevent, but it can also mean to prevent in the space, okay? Gam shehen, so it arises in this test, in this check, that these companies have also prevented or will prevent מלהעביר לישראל. להעביר, transfer. Okay, we're right here. מלהעביר, transfer לישראל, to Israel. 2.2, 2.2 מיליארד דולר במצטבר. $2.2 billion במצטבר. מצטבר is our next word, cumulatively. Okay, מצטבר is again one of these words that has to do with putting together various data points. If you are a meteorological fan of especially Israeli weather, like I am, only of Israeli weather, other countries less so, because it's fun to keep up with the rain forecast here in Israel, right? You can see maps of Geshem Mitztaber. You can see the amount of accumulative rain that we've received in Israel, right? And it says Geshem Mitztaber. Mitztaber, cumulative, or cumulatively in this case. Okay, so we put this all together up until the third line, first word. בדיקה בקרב עשרות חברות הייטק ציבוריות ופרטיות. A check or a test among dozens of high-tech companies, both private and public, whose net worth or whose aggregate worth is 40 billion US dollars, brings up that they have also, right, gam shehen, that they will also prevent or abstain from transferring to Israel, מלהעביר לישראל, from transferring to Israel, 2.2 מיליארד דולר במצטבר. $2.2 billion, excuse me, מיליארד, billion dollars accumulatively. Okay, comma. שנוצרו מהפעילות השוטפת בחו"ל. שנוצרו. נוצר is our next word. נוצר was created or was produced. Okay, notzar is a word that we use a lot in modern Hebrew, especially in the media. Notzar is the same root as litzor, to create. Yetzira is a creation. Notzar is the passive form of the verb. Okay, notzar davar madhim hayom. An amazing thing happened today. Literally, amazing thing was created today. But we use this verb notzar a lot because it contains a lot of meaning in one verb. And also, like we've talked about many times in this class, in media Hebrew and in general in Hebrew, passive voice is considered higher level Hebrew, right? So you're going to see that especially in news articles. Okay. So we talked about these companies that have been checked that are worth altogether $40 billion, that they are also preventing the transfer of $2.2 billion into Israel. Where did that money come from, that $2.2 billion? שנוצרו מהפעילות השוטפת בחו"ל. שנוצרו, that was created, right? It's money, the $2.2 billion was created. מהפעילות, from their activity. פעילות is activity, meaning their operations. השוטפת בחו"ל. Okay, חו"ל we know. Chul stands for chutz la'aretz. It means abroad, anywhere but Israel. Okay. Shotefet is a great word. We use it in a lot of different ways, right? Lishtofet hayadayim, to wash your hands. Ani medaber ivrit shotefet. I speak fluent Hebrew. But in this case, shotefet means, as you see here on the right-hand side, ongoing or day-to-day. Okay. So this money, this $2.2 billion that's been prevented from being transferred to Israel, was created through these companies' ongoing operations abroad, meaning sales, also mergers and acquisitions, all sorts of different things. Okay, so we got to the semicolon in the middle. Don't get used to seeing semicolons in Hebrew. It's not very common, but they wanted to make a break so that the next part could be understood why this is so important and how it connects to today's news. עליית הסיכון של ישראל בשל ההפיכה המשטרית כבר כאן. Okay, aliyah, we know this word already, right? The rise, not aliyah as in what we did, but aliyah, rise. Aliyat what? Aliyat hasikun. You know this is a compound word because aliyah ends with a taf. When we have two or more nouns together to create a new concept. In Hebrew, it's called smichut. Certain words, depending on their endings, have to change. So aliyah, words that end with a hey, will turn into a taf. So it turns to aliyat hasikun. Okay, sikun is our next word here on the right-hand side, risk. So the rise in risk. Okay, we're talking about financial newspaper here, right? So it's talking about financial risk. That's the context of the word sikun, risk. Aliyat hasikun shel Israel. So Israel's rise in risk. Bishel. Bishel, we talked about this family of words a couple weeks ago when we talked about biglal, biglal and mipnei and ki. Bishel is one of those other words, causative words. It means due to. Our next word here on the right-hand side. Bishel, what? So the rise in risk of Israel, or Israel's risk, Bishel haficha hamishtarit kvar kan. Mishtar is regime. Okay, Mishtar also has the same root as mishtara, police. Mishtar is a regime, or E-G-I-M-E. Haficha. Those of you who are keeping up with the news, regardless of your ideology, regardless of what you think about what's happening in the news, there are three words that all news outlets are using to describe what the government is proposing in changing the judicial system here in Israel. There's plenty of resources in English, by the way, now to read it. There wasn't so much before, now there is. There's three different words. Mahapecha, which means revolution. It's related to our word here. Haficha, a word that they use in this article, which means coup, and reforma. Reforma, reform. Okay, three different words with three obviously very different meanings and intonations. Mapecha, revolution. Haficha, coup. Right, both of these words have the same root, meaning to turn over, like cafe hafuch, upside down coffee, aka a latte. Mishtarit kvar kan. Okay, so aliyat hasikun shel Israel b'shel ha'aficha hamishtarit kvar kan. You can already see the where Calcalis is starting to stand on the issue by referring to it as a regime coup, or a change in regime. Right, haficha comes from the same root as lahafoch, to change or to turn over. Haficha means a coup. Okay, so aliyat hasikun shel Israel b'shel haficha mishtarit kvar kan. The rise in risk of Israel, economic risk, because of the change in the regime change, is already here. Kvar kan. Okay, I'm going to leave you to read the article to get the details of what that breaks down to, all those numbers. What we're going to focus on next is what looks like a big paragraph. I promise it's not as scary as it looks. Okay, it's not as scary as it looks. We're going to go through the words again that are highlighted, and I've broken it up twice. You'll see twice, so we can scroll down and see all the words together. Okay, you're going to see this is one big quote, and you're going to see who it's from in a little bit, but this is to further illustrate what people are talking about with regards to that sikun, that risk that they're talking about, to get a better sense of it. But just as a really quick background, one of the things that Israel is facing in the result of the proposed plans to change the judicial system here is already a lot of economic forecasts that downplay Israel's prosperity. Remember, Israel did really well during the last 3 years of the pandemic and during the recession that took place, and the shekel has been one of the world's strongest currencies. It's already becoming weaker against the dollar and the euro. Hence this article, and a little bit more of understanding why that money has been prevented from coming into Israel. It doesn't want to lose its value when turned into shekels. Okay, let's read this together slowly but surely. There's a lot of good words here that you're going to hear all the time, not just for people who follow financial and economic news. Okay, we're going to start here at the top where the quotation mark is. We use the same punctuation in Hebrew as we do in English for it. Okay. Excuse me. אף אחד בחו"ל לא מתעמק במאמרים ובניתוחים על מה שקורה בישראל. Okay, אף אחד, Af echad, I didn't translate this because this is a very everyday word. If you don't know this, by all means, af echad means no one. It can also mean anyone, but in this case, it means no one. Remember that in Hebrew, when you want to negate something and use a word like anyone or no one or nothing, you have to make a double negative, right? So that's why it says, Af echad bechul lo mitamek. Okay, no one bechul, abroad, lo mitamek. Mitamek is our first word here, delves into or dives into. Lehitamek comes from the same root as amok, deep, ma'amik, mimamakim, right, from the depths, right? Lehitamek, to delve into, to dive deep into. Okay, so af echad bechul lo mitamek. No one abroad is delving into. Okay, this is how we construct that negative in Hebrew. No one abroad is delving into what? What you see here is hyperlinked. במאמרים ובניתוחים על מה שקורה בישראל. Okay, no one abroad is delving into what? Ma'amarim, opinions. It comes from the verb lomar, to say. So it's op-eds, opinions, writings, further analysis of, commentary on. Ve-nituchim. Nituchim is our next word. A nituach is both an analysis and an operation. Think of it, right? You're taking something apart to further understand it. Nituach is an analysis and also an operation. Operation like a medical operation. Okay, so no one abroad is delving into the op-eds and the analyses al ma shekora b'Israel, on what's happening in Israel. Okay, comma, hadavar hayechid, the only thing, beginning of second line, she me'anyenet kulam zo, that interests everyone, is hayetzivut, zo, hayetzivut ve'asentiment. Okay, yitzivut is our next word. Yitzivut or yatzivut is stability. We had this word a couple weeks ago when we talked about adjectives. Remember yatziv and bilti yatziv? Here's the noun, right? Yatziv is stable, bilti yatziv unstable, yatzivut stability. Okay, very elegant way to create words in Hebrew. Great example, yatzivut, stability. So the only thing, the only thing that interests people, right? They're not interested in the analyses, the nituchim or the ma'amarim, the op-eds. They're only interested in two things: hayatzivut ve'hasentiment. Yatzivut is stability. Sentiment, yes, it does sound like the word sentiment, and it is. But remember, this is a financial newspaper, so it's talking about market sentiment. Those of you who don't know what market sentiment, there's a great long Wikipedia article about it. This is basically, market sentiment is the overall impression value of the market, meaning bullish or bearish. Okay, comma, middle of the second line, וכרגע בישראל, and at the moment in Israel, יש חוסר יציבות. Choser is our next word, lack of. Choser means lack, combined with a noun afterwards, right? Choser yetzivut, two nouns, lack of something. In this case, lack of stability. Okay, lack of imagination. Choser dimyon. Okay, choser means lack, and when combined with a noun following it, it means lack of. Okay, וכרגע בישראל, and at the moment in Israel, יש חוסר יציבות. There is a lack of stability. והסנטימנט הוא שלילי. And the market sentiment is שלילי, negative. Okay, we're in the beginning of the third line. Now we're going to find out who is talking right now, because it's the end quotes, and now it says, אומר מייסד ומנכ"ל של אחת מחברות ההייטק הגדולות בישראל. Okay, Omer says, right? Now we're understanding who's saying it. So says who? Miyased umankal. Miyased is our next word, founder. Okay, Miyased is a founder. Miyasedet would be a female founder. Umankal. Mankal, we've had this word many times before, but it's always good to go over it again. Menahel klali. abbreviated into mankal, and we know it's an abbreviation because those two apostrophes between the second to last and last letters. Mankal, male CEO. Mankalit is a female CEO. So who is this quote attributed to? A Meyasedu Mankal, a founder and CEO of Achat Mechevrot HaHiTech Agdolot BeYisrael. One of Chevrot HaHiTech, right? High-tech companies. What kind of high-tech companies? Hagdolot BeYisrael, one of the largest high-tech companies in Israel. Bitchum HaRefu'i. Okay, in what field or in what sector? Refu'i, health. Okay, so we know this quote is being attributed to a founder and CEO of one of the largest high-tech companies in Israel in the field of health. Biyachas lehotza'at haksafim Israel. Biyachas, our next word, really good word to know. Biyachas, here on our vocab list. Biyachas, in relation to. Yachas is relation. Biyachas le, in relation to. Biyachas, in what relation to? In relation to what? Lehotza'at haksafim Israel. Remember our headline, folks, right? 37 high-tech companies motziot $780 million Israel. 37 high-tech companies are withdrawing all this money from Israel. That's so in relation to the withdrawing or the pulling out of money from Israel, right? So when he's saying no one cares about the analyses or what's happening day to day with the planned reforms, rather they only care about what? Yitzivut v'sentiment, stability and market sentiment. And that's what they're talking about with regards to pulling out of the money. Okay, fourth line, middle of the line. Mifchinati, הוצאת הכסף היא המהלך האחראי והמתון ביותר. Okay, mifchinati, a really, really important word, folks. We use this term all the time in modern Hebrew, in the news, in writing any sort of opinion piece, whether it's social media, a position paper at work, just talking with friends and trying to express an opinion. Mifchinati means from my perspective. Okay? From my perspective, mifchinati. Mifchinati, from my perspective, hotza'at hakesef, pulling out the money, withdrawing the money, hi hamhalach ha'achra'i ve'hamatun beyoter, shenitan la'asot. Pulling out the money is hamalach, the process or the action, comes from the same root as lalechet, to go, meaning movement. Ha'achra'i, achra'i is our next word. Achra'i is responsible. And our word after that, matun, moderate. All right, so put these all together. In my perspective, or from my perspective, pulling out the money is the most responsible and moderate action, mahalach, action, movement, biotel, the most responsible and moderate action we can do, shenitan lasot, that's possible to do, כלפי החברה שלי וגם כלפי הממשלה והכלכלה הישראלי. כלפי is our next word. Pull down here. כלפי, right? כלפי means regarding or vis-a-vis. Another word we use all the time in modern Hebrew. כלפי, regarding or vis-a-vis or in reference to. Okay, so how, from his perspective, this is the most achra'i, responsible, and matun, moderate thing to do, regarding החברה שלי, regarding my company, and vegam klape, and also regarding hamemshala, the government, והכלכלה הישראלית, and the Israeli economy. Okay. Let me move down here so we can see the rest of it. We are at the end of the 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line, last two words. Ze mahalach hafich. Okay. Ze hamalach hafich. Mahalach, we already said, is a process, is a movement. Hafich. Hafich we actually had when we talked about adjectives a few weeks ago. See here on the right-hand side, it means reversible. Remember that verb lahafoch, to turn over, and that word haficha, coup and mahapecha, revolution, all these words have the exact same root. He, pe, chaf. Hafich, we talked about this when we did adjectives, right? It's an able, ibl adjective. And we know that because of its vowel construct, that a-i sound, that construct, that mishkal, is hafich means something is ibl or able. In this case, reversible, right? Because lahafoch is to turn over, to reverse. So if something is hafich, it's reverse ibl. Okay, that's how we get the word. Ze mahalach hafich. It is a reversible process. It is a reversible movement. Shelo kemo lemashal hafichat shirvul, which is not like another kind of changing around. I'm not going to get into dissecting this word, but this part that explains what it's not like. Shehi hotzaat hakinyan haruchani miYisrael v'havarat hachevra de facto lechul. Okay, kinyan ruchani. Those of you who are into high tech or startups or businesses in general in Israel, you need to know this term. Kinyan ruchani, intellectual property. Okay, really important term, right? So what he's saying is that this process of taking money out of Israel is totally reversible, as opposed to the other kind of movement, which is what? Hotzaat. It's the verbal noun of our verb lehotzi, to take out. Taking out hakinyan haruchani, the IP, the intellectual property, miYisrael, from Israel, v'havarat hachevra de facto lechul, and by de facto transferring the company abroad. Right? So he's saying that pulling out the money is not irreversible, it's reversible. It's not like removing the intellectual property of the company abroad and thus de facto transferring the company abroad. Okay, so we are 1, 2, 3 lines from the bottom here. המדינה חשובה לי. חזרתי לכאן אחרי כמה שנים בחו"ל. Right? המדינה חשובה לי. The country, meaning literally the state, meaning the state of Israel. חשובה לי is important to me. Right? חשובה is referring to medina, which is feminine. The state is important to me. חזרתי לכאן אחרי כמה שנים בחו"ל. I returned to here. חזרתי, I returned. לכאן, here. אחרי, after. כמה שנים, several years. בחו"ל, after several years abroad. Bni misharet beyichida kravit. Okay, we're at the end of the third to last, now second to last, beginning of second to last line. Bni misharet beyichida kravit. My son, Bni, misharet, serves, beyichida kravit, in a combat unit. Yechida is a unit, kravit, in this case, combat. So my son, I returned after several years abroad. My son serves in a combat unit. Zelo schmaltz. Okay, this isn't schmaltz. I'm not trying to impress upon you I'm not trying to justify anything to you. This country is important to me, and it's not being over the top, right? I returned to work in Israel. My son serves in a combat unit. Zelo schmaltz. This isn't window dressing. Or simply, this isn't schmaltz. Most of you know what schmaltz is. It's fat, right? It's not trying to put the fat on you. It's not trying to dress it up in fat or over-exaggerate things. Aval, second to last line, almost the middle of it. Aval, kerega en li brera mul hamashki'im. Aval, but, kerega, at the moment, en li brera. If you don't know this expression in Israel, in Hebrew, in Israel, it's a really important one. We use it all the time. En li brera, I don't have a choice. En li brera, ani tzarich lazmin ochel. I have no choice, I have to order food. Okay. En li brera, I don't have a choice. En li brera, as he says, at the moment, en li brera, I don't have a choice. Mul hamashki'im. Mul we had a couple weeks ago, remember? In front of who? Hamashki'im. Mashki'im comes from the verb lehashkia, to invest. Mashkia is an investor. Mashki'im, investors. At the moment, however, I don't have a choice. I don't have any choice in front of my investors. Hatafkid sheli kemankal hu. Hatafkid is our next word. Tafkid is a role. And tafkid, by the way, we can use both in a company setting like here. We can use it in a play or in a movie. Tafkid is a role in any kind of function like that. התפקיד שלי כמנכ"ל, my role, התפקיד שלי, my role, כמנכ"ל, as CEO, who is, we're at the end of this paragraph, the beginning of the last line. להילחם. My role as CEO is to do what? להילחם, to fight. מול, against. In this case, it means against, not in front of before. Now it's against. Who? המתחרים. מתחרים, our next word, competitors. תחרות in Hebrew is a contest. להתחרות is to compete. מתחרים are competitors, right? So you have competitors, מתחרים בתחרות, in a contest. In this case, he's a company, he has competitors out there in the same field of התחום הרפואי, in the medical field, okay? But he has no choice in front of my investors. My role, התפקיד שלי כמנכ"ל, as CEO, is to fight, להילחם מול המתחרים, towards my investors, ולא על הדמוקרטיה הישראלית, and not on or towards Israeli democracy. This is all a point to say he needs to take care of the company's money, which he deems as being safer and less risk, and has less risk if being either sent or staying abroad than coming into Israel. As I said before, because there's already speculation, the shekel will get weaker as this argument over the proposed reforms continues. We actually already saw that today with the stock exchange going down. That's the context of this article. Again, I will send you a link to this article when we post this lesson and the spreadsheet with words in the next day or so. It's worth reading. It's certainly worth listening to so you can read it together, but also because this specific item of news has not been translated yet in English, much less covered by other places. Because remember, this is a bidika. This is their own check. This is their own analysis done by the newspaper Kalkalist into what's happening in the high-tech sector. Very important. As I taught my students today in my startup class, remember that startups, even though they employ only 10% of Israel's population, they contribute to 25% of all income tax. It's a lot of money, and 43% of all of Israel's exports, and it's overall 15% of Israel's GDP. Okay, I'm going to stop here and take some questions, and then we're going to wrap up. Wayne asks, חברות or asakim? חברות, Wayne, are companies. Asakim, בעלי עסק. עסק is simply a business. So asakim are businesses. Okay? בעלי עסק is a business owner. Business owners, rather. So חברות, company, asakim, businesses. Alan asks, if a financial number doesn't say dollar, is it implied that the number is shkalim in such an article? Yes, Alan, it will say, just like with all other articles, if it is dollar or shekel. In this case, it explicitly said dollars. Karen, happy to send you the 3 news sources. I will actually write them here right now in the spreadsheet so you can all see at the same time. Let me just open that up again. Okay, we have here, sorry, Kalkalist, globes. Okay, the way they're written in Hebrew, Kalkalist, globes, de mar. Okay, these are the 3 financial newspapers of Israel. The 3 major ones, that is Kalkalist, Globes, The Marker. You can Google these very easily and get to their websites. Globes and the marker have the most in English. Of those two, Globes is probably the best. Calcalist on occasion translates things into English, but Globes and the marker certainly has a lot more in English content. Okay. Okay, let's get back to some more questions. John, is a bdika in this context equivalent to a poll? No, John, it really means like checking, like how, think of it like Consumer Reports, like they're checking into something. It's not a poll. It's not a scientific poll, right? They're not doing statistics here. They're doing raw data to find this out. Ellen, what was bitchum and what's the shoresh? Okay. Let's go back to that in just a second. Tchum, right? We have that in the third line here, second to last word, tchum. Tchum means sector, or it can mean anything meaning like sector or category or space, even genre sometimes. In the field of, it really means in this context, right? In the field of, tchum is field, sector, genre. Okay. The root is taf chet mem. It's related to the word mitcham, which is like a compound. So think of it like compound field. They sort of work together. But tchum means field in the context of a abstract field. Okay. Some more questions. Okay. Rachel, what's the difference between sikun and sakana? Great. So remember we had the word sikun here, right? Sikun, financial risk, right? Sikun means risk. Sakana means danger. Same exact root, and it's good that you're connecting the different roots together, the same root rather, in different vowels, because they mean slightly different things, right? Sikun, sakana. Sikun is risk, danger. Okay, risk and danger, just like there's a difference in English, so too there is in Hebrew. Okay. One last question that has to do with this lesson. As I can see, what is the origin of the word for worth? Right, we had that word shovi, right? What does shovi sound like? Shovi is a great word, by the way. Let me take it out. Shovi is related to the words, let me right here. Shovi is related to the word shaveh. Shaveh means equal. Shaveh means equal. It also means, in slang Hebrew, it means worth it. Like if something's shaveh, it's worth doing. It's good. Okay. Equal. It also is related to the verb lehashvot. Lehashvot. To compare. Sorry. All right. All right, let me just make that smaller so you can see. To compare, lehashvot. Hashva'a is a comparison. Hashva'a is a comparison. If it'll let me change. Right? Comparison is hashva'a. And finally, another word that we get from this root is shivyon, right? Equality. Okay, shivyon means equality. It comes all from the same root, which you can see here, right? Shin, vav, hey. Shovi, worth or value. שווה equal, להשוות, to compare, השוואה, comparison, שוויון, equality. Right, from that same root, we get all these different words in it. Great example of a very well-worked shoresh, as it were. Okay, we need to break here. We have 2 lessons ahead before we break for the winter session. So toda rabah, thank you all so much for joining. And like I said, stay tuned for our next 2 classes. We'll be back here at 8 o'clock Israel time on Zoom. This lesson will be up on YouTube in the next few days, along with the spreadsheet, along with the link to that article. You'll also get it in your mail if you are signed up for our classes. Any other questions, please write us at Nefesh B'Nefesh with any requests you might have for this class. Toda rabah, thank you all so much, and lihitraot. See you all very soon. Take care.